Hi everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoteric and our continuing series where I review every single Capcom CP, CP System Dash, CPS2, and CPS3 game ever made. We got another CP System Dash game for you today, and that is Warriors of Fate. Before you get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like, subscribe, ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. If you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down there as well. But Warriors of Fate is a really good beat 'em up game, but I would say that it's definitely still B tier compared to Final Fight and some of the other beat 'em ups that we have talked about on this review series. And interestingly, it also starts with you as a mounted rider, but unlike some of the other Capcom games we've talked about where you fight on horseback, you can actually lose your mount and have to fight on foot. So the first rule of thumb is try to keep your horse for as long as possible because it provides you a massive advantage against your opponents in the game. Now this game looks absolutely stunning. It sounds great because of that Q sound chip. I love all the art and all the colors in it, and the combat is extremely good. Where I think this game falls a little bit flat is in two arenas. One, it just throws way too many enemies at you at once. And that's not to say that I just don't like it because I think it's hard. Sometimes it takes, 60 plus seconds to clear a single screen of enemies before you're able to move on. And that leads directly into my second dislike about the game, is that all the areas feel quite the same, for lack of a better term. It kind of just moves you from one area to the other, and it might change the color palette, but you kind of feel like you're continually just playing the same section of the game over and over again for a period of time that makes it feel like it can get slightly boring. Short of that though, it's an awesome beat 'em up, and a B tier Capcom beat 'em up is better than 90% of everything else on the market. But this is one of those games that doesn't get talked about near as much compared to something like Final Fight or Capcom's best beat 'em ups, so maybe you've never checked it out. If that's the case, definitely do. You'll see there we lost our horse for a moment. You get the chance to lose the horse once and you can remount him, but once you're knocked off a second time, that horse is going to run. And it's going to be a long time until you get the opportunity to get a horse back, so you really want to do your absolute best to keep your horse friend there, because once you lose him, you're on foot and the game becomes twice as difficult. And obviously that's by design. If you kept the horse the entire time, you'd end up in a situation where the game was too easy. And of course it is an arcade game and it does want your quarters. But you'll see here during the boss battle, we have like 5 or 6 different opponents to handle outside of the boss, and it's not too bad. But as we move on, it's going to get a little bit more difficult. But you'll see here directly into round 2, it's just a continuation of the area that we just fought in. And of course, the color palette's cooled down. It looks like the sun's setting. But it feels so similar to the first area that I kind of feel like I'm just playing a continuation of what I just did. And I really wish Capcom had just kind of changed the scenery up a little bit more so that it felt a little bit more intriguing. And now you'll see here we're fighting these 2 larger enemies. A lot of this game can start to feel a little bit like a boss battle arena, because you'll go from one boss to another very quickly, or you'll beat one boss and get put into an arena where you have to defeat 20 plus enemies before you can even move on. This is just, like 2 screens past where we fought the first boss, and we're already into a situation where it's starting to feel like the game is just artificially slowing us down. Because you'll see here we get to move forward a little bit, but again, there's just going to be a ton of enemies that immediately run out and stop our forward progress until we can defeat them all, which is not bad in a beat 'em up game, but it's just one of those things where I kind of wish the game would move ever so slightly quicker forward. Because now you'll see we got like 10 guys that we need to fight, and it can just get a little bit stale every once in a while. But honestly, maybe that's a bigger complaint than it should be, and that's just kind of me and the way that I like the art direction in games. I just love when things change up quick enough so that I feel like I'm playing a new area. But mechanically, as far as the actual beat 'em up part of the beat 'em up is concerned, it performs extremely well. It keeps to a minimum my #1 complaint about beat 'em ups, where your impacts don't hit if you're not perfectly lined up with your enemy. It plays fair, it's tough, and when you actually learn some of the moveset and get more used to the characters, all of the gameplay feels amazing. You'll see here I picked up a battle axe, but I instantaneously got knocked back by those archers. And this area is really nice. We got some great, fire effects. We have a horse available to us. It's the first time we've had a chance to pick up a new mount. And when you're playing this game and you're beating everybody up, it feels great. And that's kind of the thing, is I feel like if Capcom had just pushed a little bit harder with this one, we would have had an all-time classic from them versus a really, really good game that just doesn't meet the same expectations as something like Final Fight. And That's kind of the issue when you make a game as incredible as Final Fight. Everything is going to get compared to it, and sometimes it's hard to live up to that hype. But the soundtrack's also great. Go ahead and listen for about 30-45 seconds, and then I'll go ahead and we'll talk a little bit more about the game and why I think even if you've never played it before, you should definitely check it out. Oh, and people have mentioned that they like seeing me change characters when I play these games, so let's switch the character out for a new guy. Be right back. I love the little speech samples they give you in the Capcom CP System Dash games too. They definitely wanted to show off that new sound hardware that they had. And like pretty much every Capcom game, there's a mini game between levels. In this instance, you need to button mash to eat the food that's in front of you. And honestly, I mashed and mashed and mashed. I can destroy the car in Final Fight really easily, but for some reason, I never win at this particular event. I don't know if it's a timing thing and I'm just not picking up on it. I get not really close whatsoever. I got completely schooled there on all that food, and boy, it did look delicious. I could actually go for some Chinese buns for dinner right about now. But moving on, at least now we're in a new area, but this is still like 10 minutes into the gameplay before we get to the second stage where we get a little bit of a scenery change, and I do at least appreciate that we have something new to look at, but I wish it just came a little bit sooner. But now we're playing as Abaka here, and it's just a little bit of a different character. They all play very similar. It's not like a different game where, you know, you have a dwarf character, you have a magic character. It's pretty much all just melee combat. But it feels really good, and I do like the weapon pickups. I just wish that you got a few more weapons a few more often, because I won't say they're stingy with the weapons, but you don't get them as often as I wish you would, especially during boss fights. But I do like that he just open palm slapped that barrel into oblivion. And right here, again, before we get to the castle, I just wish that we didn't have to fight 20 characters. Just make it 10 and show me some more of the game. The biggest thing about this game is it feels like it just wants to artificially slow you down because there's not that much level there for you to see. So to make sure you're getting your time and money's worth, it just gives you a small amount of actual playable area to check out. But you'll see here, basically, we just went from the forest through that gate, and we're already into another boss battle. And that's what I mean when I say this can sometimes feel like a boss rush mode. There's very little stage in places, and there's a lot of boss battle. And Tyrannus here, his life bar is huge, and you know, those impacts take a decent amount of it off, but it's going to be a long boss battle because he's going to have areas in which he has invulnerability, and he's going to be able to stun lock you as well if you get too close. So I don't want to call it cheap, it's not. It just seems like it's an artificially long boss battle before you can go to the next area. And you'll see definitely in a second what I mean about this feeling like a boss rush mode. Because once we actually beat Tyrannus here, we switched over to Kadan the Archer. Probably the worst character in the game, but I wanted to show you multiple people. But right after we beat him, we're going to get a little bit more story, and then we're immediately going to be into another boss battle. We get no gameplay. We don't get to beat up on low-level enemies. We're just going to jump right into that battle. And for some strange reason, all the voice samples for all the characters seem to be the same voice. It doesn't change whatsoever, so maybe they just didn't have the ROM storage for that. But you'll see here, as we're moving further into the castle, we're immediately back into a boss battle again against 3 ninja women. And it's a fun boss battle, don't get me wrong, but I wish I just had something else to do between fighting one boss and going to another. I don't want to say it's repetitive, it's just not a gameplay type that I like. I mean, I love a good boss rush mode if it's an extra mode on top of the game, but if the game just feels like a boss rush mode in and of itself, I kind of lose a little bit of interest in it. But yeah, that is Warriors of Fate. It's a really good beat 'em up game. It's definitely not Capcom's best effort, but if you're looking for a new beat 'em up to play and you haven't checked it out yet, you're definitely going to probably enjoy it. Like I said, maybe I was a little too critical on the design choices in this game, but it's always down just to personal preference about what we like. And we're getting really close to the end of the Capcom CP System Dash videos. Actually, now that I say that out loud, I realize this is the last video in that series because they really didn't release many games on that platform. And next Tuesday, we're going to be moving right into the Capcom CPS2. Now, I did already do a series about that hardware, so I'm only going to be reviewing the games that I already haven't talked about because I don't want to do a retread of all of them. But the CPS2 has some of the best arcade games Capcom has ever made on that platform, and I'm really excited to show you guys a lot of that. I'm going to be doing it all off original hardware, no emulation. Short of that, thanks so much for watching. Do me a huge favor, go down below and hit like, subscribe, and that notification bell definitely helps us out. If you have any questions or comments or opinions on the game, leave them down below because I love chatting with you guys. Otherwise, I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.